if they're like, okay, I really am really good with depression, but you struggling with insomnia and self-harming, you're going to be looking at them like, bruh, can you help me or not? Hey, welcome back to Undefined Therapy. And today we're going to be interviewing the therapist. That's right. I'm going to tell you what you need to ask your therapist. So it's really important to not walk into the office space with the therapist and feel like everything is completely out of your control. They get to know everything about me and I don't get to know anything. You're wrong. It should not be that type of dynamic. And if it is, then you need to ask these questions and decide if you want to stay there. This is often one of the major problems why people leave from either first or second session and they're like, oh, therapy is not for me. No, honey, that therapist might have not been right for you. There's a difference. There's a difference. So I wanted to just give some questions that you can ask. Now, I'm going to go on record and say this. If a therapist has a problem answering these questions, then you ain't got no business being in their office. Okay? Okay. Yeah. So before I jump on into those questions, I definitely want to encourage you to subscribe here to Undefined Therapy, where I make mental health videos 2 to 3 times a week. So definitely think about subscribing. Yes. So let's talk about how we can interview this therapist now. Number 1, my problem is How would you go about treating this? So if your problem is depression, anxiety, insomnia, anger issues, whatever it is, you state that. And then the therapist should respond and say, okay, I have experience with insomnia, self-harm, anxiety. I will go about treating it with cognitive therapy, narrative therapy, solution-focused therapy. They should be able to tell you these things, but then they should go further. And then they should say, okay, if I'm going to go about treating it with cognitive behavioral therapy, that goes along with we're going to identify your thoughts, your feelings, and help to change those behaviors so you can feel a little bit more in control and understand your problem. Yes, I have been asked that question before, so I know how to answer. And I'm okay answering it because I know my stuff. So that's one question that you can go in there and ask and feel like you're in good hands about what you're struggling with. Number 2 is finding out if they are a person who wants to dig deep or they're like, okay, let's get you in and get you out. Those are important because whatever you're struggling with, you're like, okay, look, I only got 8 sessions to do what I need to do because that's all I can afford. You need to know if your therapist is somebody who wants to like go into the long haul and wants to just look at every other theme, pattern, track it back to its source, or if they're able to accommodate you for those 8 to 10 sessions and deal with the problem and give you tools and coping skills in order for you to maintain and live a healthy life. So it's very important for you to understand, am I dealing with a short-term therapist or a long-term therapist? Or if they can do both. Number 3 is to find out if your therapist is more of the director or the non-director. Now, what that means is that some therapists, as the director, like to have their own agenda. When you come in, they're like, I want to work on this, this, and this. Did you do your homework? Yes, I said homework. We do create little tasks for you to do, to challenge you, to bring it back into the office. But they're like, okay, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Now, if you're like, okay, yes, because I don't know what I'm going to talk about, I need them to draw it out of me, then having a therapist that leads more may be in your wheelhouse. But if you're a person who has a lot of things to say, you like have things that you want to address based on how you're feeling, what's going on, then you might like a therapist who will follow your lead, who will just be able to be very spontaneous and go with the flow. And whatever you come into the office with is what you'll tackle. But knowing the difference is very important to know so you can get the best out of your therapy session. Because if you have your own agenda and your therapist is like only doing what they think that you need, you're going to be like, I ain't getting nothing out of this. They ain't even let me talk. We ain't even talk about what I needed to talk. No, that's not true. You just got the wrong therapist, as I said. Or you need to let your therapist know so that they can switch up their style as well. Number 4 is what kind of atmosphere or relationship do you have with your therapist? Is your therapist more of the person where they're doing a laboratory style where you bring in things and we game plan and we talk about how you felt about it, how to deal with it, how to process it, and then give you more things to take on the outside world, and then you come back in and we process it? That's like a laboratory where you're kind of learning, experimenting, processing all at the same time. But if you're a person that really just wants a lecture style where you come to therapy to find the necessary skills, the coping skills, the resources, information, books to learn, then you're probably going to want the lecture style. So it's important to know what type of relationship role does your therapist feel more comfortable with. You know, maybe they can do both. I'd like to hope that they can do both, but therapists do have kind of their comfort zone. So it's important to know which one. If you want just resources and information and tips and tools, lecture style is what you want. But if you want to process, game plan, learn things, role play, that's going to be more in the laboratory style. Number 5, I think it's so important for people to come in and ask their therapist what are their strengths. And I like this question because it's also to know that your therapist is human, that your therapist does have things that they feel good about themselves and that they really just feel great about, because we all have our strengths. But in the office, you want to know what their strengths are as well, because if they're like, okay, I really am really good with depression, but you struggling with insomnia and self-harming, you're going to be looking at them like, bruh, can you help me or not? So it's important for them to talk about their strengths and just create this atmosphere that hopefully isn't just like a wall up where you're over there and I'm over there. And it just gives the therapist, I think, an opportunity to create dialogue and be more humanistic. And lastly, I hope I don't ruffle no feathers out there with therapists, but I think this is a really good question and a very valid and legit one. And that is, have you ever been in therapy? Sometimes this can make all of the difference between the client and the therapist by them knowing that you've been on the other side of the couch, that you know what it's like to expose yourself, to be vulnerable, to be open with someone who you don't know week after week, can really just allow them to feel like, hey, I'm not alone, and B, you know what? You can be very empathetic to what I'm going through, and I can talk to you about things because, hey, you've been on this other side, so there's no need to rush, and there's no need for me to really, hopefully, protect yourself too much, because you're like, okay, this person has done their own work. They have understood their own insecurities, processed their own demons, so they don't need to be working out a whole bunch of stuff while I'm trying to work out through it. They understand the process, not only textbook style, but real lifestyle. And I think that those are very important. For myself as a therapist, I have been a few times in my life. So there's no need for me to process or for me to project onto my clients, because I've dealt with a lot of my stuff. And if you haven't found out some of the stuff that I've had to deal with, then check out my video series that I did with my mother. Yes, my mother. Don't walk into those therapists' office feeling very powerless and that you have to subject yourself to just being completely open without knowing anything about them. Ask them these questions. Let that be a good foundation on the first session that you have with them, so that you don't have to waste their time or your time. If you found these 6 questions helpful, then I do encourage you to subscribe. Don't forget to like this video. Let us know down below, have you ever asked your therapist these questions? Are you thinking about asking them? Why would you not ask them? Let us know down below. I'd love to respond to them and just hear the different interactions, because even though I've had a lot of clients come on my couch, everybody's experience is different. No one is very much alike. And if you need that nudge for me to say, go ahead and ask that question, I'm doing it right now, but I'll also do it if you ask. You can find me on all my social medias at Undefined Therapy. Yeah, go ahead and follow me. I post things, not as much as I should, but I will get better. But yes, I'm rambling now, but I will see you in my next video.